everyone. The rhetorical text I chose was Abbott Elementary, specifically Season 4, Episode 10, called Testing. In this episode, Jacob Hill, one of the teachers, he sets out on a mission to get a student named RJ who's pretty disengaged, involved in after-school activities. So in the bottom left corner, we have the teacher and the student RJ. At first, Jacob tries to put RJ into existing spaces like the school podcast and the principal's step team, but RJ isn't very interested. And then eventually Jacob discovers that RJ enjoys being outdoors and spending time with friends, and that realization leads him to connect RJ with another teacher's gardening club, and it's called the Garden Goofballs. And the episode balances comedy with a genuine message, which is finding the right rhetorical pathway to include a student who otherwise feels detached from school. My analysis today will focus on the two arguments for why this episode is rhetorical. First, Jacob, the teacher, uses symbolic action to persuade RJ to see himself differently. And second, the way the episode dramatizes inclusion and exclusion, which ties directly to Chavez's essay Beyond Inclusion. James Halsby reminds us that rhetoric isn't only speeches, it's also symbolic action that creates meaning in the world. So Jacob's actions throughout this episode embody that definition. When Jacob offers RJ opportunities in clubs, it's more than a teacher just filling time. He's actually symbolically telling RJ, you matter, your interests matter, and you belong here. He's not getting paid extra for this. Even though RJ is kind of resisting in the beginning, the repeated attempts by Jacob show how rhetoric works through persistence and creative reframing. So Jacob doesn't abandon the persuasion, he redefines it in a way until it resonates with RJ. So when he eventually moves to the Garden Goofballs Club, it's symbolic because it reframes RJ's identity. He's not a disengaged student, but he's someone who can flourish in a supportive, nature-focused environment. It illustrates Halsby's argument that rhetoric reshapes our sense of reality, and Jacob literally changes how RJ is positioned within the school community, so not through force, but through the symbolic acts of inclusion, so including him. Chavez argues that rhetoric is deeply tied to inclusion and exclusion, who gets welcomed into a space and who remains on the margins. So Jacob first tries to put RJ into the podcast, the step team. They're technically inclusive opportunities, but for RJ, they feel forced and irrelevant. It just shows that offering inclusion isn't enough, but it should be rhetorically meaningful. And then the principal, Ava, she undermines Jacob's authority with humor and sarcasm, and she tries to exclude his efforts from being taken seriously. And when RG's own interests are centered with gardening, nature, and friendship, the inclusion truly does happen. The episode makes a rhetorical argument that inclusion isn't about fitting people into pre-existing molds, but sort of reshaping spaces to reflect their identities. And that's Chavez's point, which that inclusion is never neutral. It's always rhetorical, negotiated through whose voices and interests are recognized. It also persuades beyond the classroom because for audiences, it reframes public schools as spaces where teachers negotiate identity and belonging. Jacob's awkward, but he's heartfelt and he's persistent, and it resonates with viewers because it highlights how teachers act rhetorically every day, not just through lectures, but through the way they invite students into community, and if they invite students into community. Ava's role matters too. She's very humorous and it persuades audiences to laugh. But then you also think critically about who gets to define the serious educational work. She's a comic relief, but it also emphasizes that authority is also constructed through performance. So why exactly is Abbott Elementary's Season 4, Episode 10 rhetorical? It's rhetorical because it dramatizes how persuasion, inclusion, and symbolic action shape real communities. Jacob's journey with RJ, it sort of shows rhetoric as a symbolic action, small gestures that transform disengagement into belonging. And then Ava's, the principal's commentary, shows rhetoric as performance, deciding whose efforts count and whose don't. Through Halsby and Chavez, we see this comedy as more than entertainment. It's a rhetorical text that critiques education, power, and inclusion, and it reminds us that even something as ordinary as like an after-school club is actually an argument about what it means to belong. And it just really hit me because I feel like having teachers or professors who really reach out to you and, you know, include you in things, it means a lot, and it makes you want to strive to do more things in school as well. And also, I'm about to share a short video of Jacob in that podcast club. It's like a little funny clip so you guys get an idea of how that school really is and how the students are and the teachers. So I'm going to play it right now.
Yeah, thanks for letting us make it our own.
For this Abbott life. Here's Clarence and Raheem.
So, what questions do you little reporters have for me today?
My mama said she saw you at the club grinding all up on producer Mr. Eddie.
What kind of podcast is this?
Okay, so you were grinding.
No, I was not. We were dancing, you know, just how normal people dance, right? Like normal people.
Yeah.
Clarence's mom said she saw you leave together.
But that is not true.
Then what happened?
I was outside talking to his friend Maurice.
What? Jacob, isn't this exactly the kind of podcast we wanted to steer away from?
Actually, I would love to hear if you have anything you'd like to add, you know, for journalistic purposes.
This episode was brought to you by the Coleman Podcast Network.
Yeah, we're still waiting for that answer.